What's going on, Chargers fans? Chargers Now is presented by Prize Picks. I'm your host, Will Ortner, and on today's show, we're going to look at an ESPN article that asked two really fun questions about the Los Angeles Chargers, and I think we're going to get a really exciting look at what our new defensive coordinator is going to be like in Chris O'Leary. I think that these questions are not necessarily answerable yet because, well, we haven't seen what Chris O'Leary is going to be like when it comes to him calling plays as a DC in the National Football League. But we can look at certain things that he was doing at Western Michigan. We could look at certain things that Jesse Minter was doing when he was the defensive coordinator last year for the Chargers and really kind of see where a game plan is going to go for this Chargers defense in the 2026 NFL season. And frankly, I think it's a really interesting article and a really fun update. How do you think Chris O'Leary will perform as the Chargers defensive coordinator? Now, we're going to limit it to this year. Do you think he's going to be the next branch, the next long line person in the Mike Macdonald, Jesse Minter disciple tree? Or do you think that, hey, maybe this might not end up going the way that you want? Let me know down below in the comment section what your opinion is. So the questions that ESPN asked when it came to the Chargers defense is essentially, what is going to stay the same? Jesse Minter was obviously a very successful defensive coordinator in Los Angeles. It seems like pretty much everything that he did, the strings that he pulled on, the buttons that he pressed, worked. Is Chris O'Leary going to be able to do the same thing? And then what is going to change? Because inevitably, you cannot do the same style of defense, or I guess I should say the exact same defense every single time. Now, obviously, Chris O'Leary is going to run a version of the Macdonald defense, the Minter defense. It's all about the same, which has its roots essentially in a 3-4 type of a scheme, but because of a special safety in LA, it is Derwin James Jr., obviously. Now, if you look over at Seattle, it would be Nicky Manwari, but because of the specialty that they have with their player at that safety position, they get to play more of a 4-2-5 defense, essentially. And that is important. And I think that O'Leary is still going to run that same 4-2-5 base, but what'll be interesting to see is what does he change stylistically. Now we know that Jesse Minter ran one of the best defenses in the National Football League. That is something that is inarguable, right? The Chargers were absolutely fantastic under Minter the last couple of years, and I think that Minter has really shown, it's why he's now a head coach, just what type of defensive mind that he is. What's interesting, though, is even aside from James and Khalil Mack, it's not like that Chargers team has a ton of star power. There's a lot of really good players, but I don't know that anyone jumps off of the page aside from those two and really Khalil Mack's on the back half of his career. Ben Solak really emphasized that point and then brought up how impressive it was that this defense was that talented and that good. Over the previous two seasons, Minter's defense allowed a minus 0.08 EPA per dropback, seventh best in the NFL, and an opposing passer rating of 81.4, third best. The Chargers have done this without spectacular talent. Derwin James Jr. remains one of the league's preeminent safeties, of course, but he is the Chargers' only defensive All-Pro of the last two seasons. Now, some other guys that had some success under Minter that are still here on the team, obviously, come on a multitude of different spots. Now, Tuli had a lot of success on the edge. I could have thrown Odafe Owe in this, but obviously he's not still in Los Angeles. Tart, obviously, had a big extension in the preseason or early on, so that is something that ended up becoming a big deal for this team. Tony Jefferson retired, came back, has been awesome under Minter. Hart, still, they were doing a lot of really good things at a quarter position that, frankly, the Chargers are lacking a little bit in star power because of some of the dead cap money that they were still dealing with. Jesse Minter was able to get the most out of this defense. Normally, when you see great defenses, you see a great schemer as well as a couple of great players. What's fascinating about the Chargers is you saw a great schemer, one great player, and then a lot of really good players. So the question is going to be, is new defensive coordinator Chris O'Leary going to be able to build a scheme that works very similar to Minter's while growing the players just the way that Minter did. We got more to discuss on today's program, but first, I need to let you know that today's show is made possible by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 sports picks app and is the best place to win cash while watching sports. With the baseball season in full swing, there's no better time to cash in with our friends at Prize Picks. And I'll tell you this, the app is really easy to use. To qualify for a Prize Picks lineup, pick 2 to 6 players and select more or less on stat projections, including hits, home runs, strikeouts, and several others across all sports. One thing I love is the new social feeds feature, where you can share Prize Picks with your friends and copy lineups with a single click. You can actually follow me on the app at BigWill7774 to see all of my lineups. I have a lineup for the football action going on later on this year. Quentin Johnston, more on his receiving TDs. Kenyon Sadiq, more on his receiving TDs. Jackson Smith and Jigba, more on his receiving TDs. New user offer. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use code HMA when you play your first $5 lineup to receive $50 in lineups. That's code HMA when you play your first $5 lineup to get an extra $50 in lineups with Prize Picks. Clickable link to download the app is in the comments and description. Ben Solak had more to say on Jesse Minter's defense and what made it fascinating and why he really calls him such a great schemer at that defensive coordinator position. Most teams that play this much zone coverage, Minter's defense was one of the top in the National Football League, surrender a high success rate to opposing offenses, choosing instead to limit explosive plays and hunt turnovers on long drives forced by their cautious style. Not the Chargers. Minter's defense stands alone over the past 2 seasons as the heavy zone team that didn't allow opposing offenses to walk their way down the field. That leads to this question: will O'Leary keep the same kind of coaching style? Is he going to run a lot more zone and force opposing offenses to beat him? This is something that you see employed a lot in the high school and college levels because in most of those situations, well, they're high school and college kids. Quarterbacks make mistakes. In the National Football League, those mistakes don't end up really becoming a thing. And that is something that you're going to have to ask, and we're going to have to see, is the new defense in Los Angeles going to continue to run zone at the rate that it did before? Now, Minter was not known for being a super heavy blitz guy in the National Football League. Well, when you look at Chris O'Leary's blitz tendencies, he actually was one of the higher blitzing coaches in all of college football last year when he was over at Western Michigan. Ben Solak outlines that type of blitzing tendency. In his 1 season coordinating, O'Leary was far more willing to send additional bodies in the rush than Minter was with the Chargers or at Michigan in the Big Ten. O'Leary called blitzes at 33.5% of plays last season with Western Michigan. Minter maxed out at 22.9%. So when you look at O'Leary, he's probably a little bit more of a gambler than necessarily Minter is, who was much more of a zone coverage guy and trusting that his team is going to be able to do what he expects them to do and what he wants them to do. When I look at O'Leary, a big reason why you look at guys like Dame Tucker and the rest of that Western Michigan defense, the reason why they had so much success is because, well, they were able to play with their hair on fire, and their DC was able to put them in a position to where they were going to have a lot of success doing that. So I do expect more blitzing to come from the Los Angeles Chargers, which will be interesting and doesn't mean that they have to come out of the zone coverage that they want to run. It's very easy for them to run fire zones, which AKA fire equals blitz, so that's a zone blitz in this type of defense, especially with a player like Derwin James on the edge, just because of all the different players that he's able to cover and how much easier he makes life for this team when it comes to their rules. So we look back at the questions that we started today's show with. What will stay the same and what will end up changing with this defense? Look, yes, the main style of defense is going to stay the same. But how that defense looks, how often it does different things, the tendencies, the play calls, frankly, they just have to change because O'Leary has to be able to call the defense the way that he wants to. If he tries to call the defense the way that Minter would, it's just not going to be successful because he doesn't see the game the same way. The same way that no two people are the same, is the same way it is with the play calling abilities of a coordinator. Will the Chargers have a top 10 defense this year? Let me know down below in our comment section if you think that the defense is still going to be just as talented and just as good as they were before. Yes or no? I expect a slight defensive adjustment. What's going to stay the same? I think the main shell of what this defense is going to be what stays the same. I actually think that you're going to see a lot of zone coverage. Chargers clearly do that really well. I think you'll see that number drop down ever so slightly because obviously O'Leary is not Minter, but I do think you are going to see a heavier blitz emphasis from this Chargers team. Now, thinking that the Chargers are going to blitz at over a quarter of the time, that might be a tad bit aggressive, but when I look at what O'Leary clearly wants to do is he wants to heat up quarterbacks, and being someone who coached defensive backs for a good chunk of his career, O'Leary's going to want to make sure that he makes life as easy as possible for his cornerbacks and for his safeties. I think that a little bit of speed now and again, especially with all of the defensive talent that this Chargers team has, is a good thing for Los Angeles. And I really do think that this defense is going to be able to pick up largely where it left off. Here's what Ben Solak had to say on his expectations for the Chargers. If O'Leary tries to replicate Minter's defense with the Chargers, he'll almost certainly miss expectations. I said that. If he's willing to run his own stuff and be able to survive the inevitable growing pains that will have fans grumbling, we might see the next branch of the Macdonald coaching tree rise this season in Los Angeles. I could not agree more. I think that O'Leary is clearly a talented play caller and a talented coach. The players around him love playing for him. That's clear. There might be a bump in the road or a couple bumps in the road early on. Maybe the defense takes a slight step back. But I'm telling you, when you want this defense to be humming late, I think that O'Leary's got a good shot at doing that for this Los Angeles Chargers team. Hit that subscribe button. Never miss any Chargers news or rumors all year long. Thank you guys so much for viewing the video. Hope that you have a great one. Go tell someone that you love them and bolt up.